Warning! Tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, time to do a follow-up on the 300B project that we've been working on. This is an old project that I did a long time ago that I've really enjoyed listening to. And as you probably saw, we've upgraded it with some ISO Tango output transformers that we got from Tubes USA. Put the link below. Thanks, George, for walking me through their products. If you're interested in buying their stuff, just give George a call or send him an email. He's happy to kind of steer you through the product line and figure out what's best for your use. So these are specifically made to use with these type of direct heated triodes. And a little spoiler, they are incredible. I'm really just blown away with how huge a difference they are from the Edcors that these replaced. And so I know they're expensive, but so are things like these Western Electric 300B tubes. And I'm going to do a video about the difference between the Skunkie 300B-Z tubes that I've been using and these Western Electric tubes. And I'm not going to give you a spoiler on that. You'll have to stay tuned for that video. But this one is focused on these output transformers. We're going to start off the video with what I found that was causing the intermittent short after I replaced these transformers, because I did a video about that. If you didn't see it, you can go back and watch that. But anyway, I found the problem. It was a simple fix. Then ran some sweeps on the Analog Discovery 2 with the Audio Analyzer suite to showcase the improvement that these transformers gave. So let's get into the video. Okay, so the puzzler in the last Monday monologue about this amp having an intermittent short. I think most of y'all are going to be right that it's this big film cap is the problem. It's the only thing that was really messed with as part of replacing the color on the end bells. Had to take this bolt out that also holds this clamp for this capacitor in place. And this clamp normally just barely goes around this cap, and I actually had to put a little bit of contact cement here to get it to stay in place. It was fitted so loosely around it, so it wasn't squeezing it real tight where it would choke it or cause it to short out. But when I was putting the amp back together, I came in with an Allen wrench and was tightening this bolt from the top side with this nut, one of those keeps nuts with a little washer made on it. And when I was tightening the bolt, this clamp twisted like this. And it twisted pretty severely. I mean, it was turned about 90 degrees, like this, which definitely crushed down the center of this capacitor and made this corner dig into the bottom of it here. And even though this is plastic, it's fairly stiff PVC, and what it had to have done is it must have pierced the insulation between a couple layers of the cap, and I believe this is going to be the culprit. Now, I haven't tested it yet, and I obviously haven't replaced it yet. I've got one here that I can replace it with, but if I hadn't had this issue and I really was clueless about where the short was, what I would do first is disconnect this wire here at the rectifier tube that goes over to the top mounted choke, and it's the path of the high voltage once it leaves the rectifier tube after this first cap. And that would isolate this first cap from the rest of the amplifier. And if it still had the intermittent short problem going on, then I would know, hey, there's nothing else left connected except this cap. Then the next thing you could do would be to connect the choke back up and then disconnect this choke wire right here where it comes out of the choke, and then you've got the cap and the choke. Then you could hook this wire back up, and at this point I would probably hook this wire back up and disconnect these two, because these go over to these big caps in the front, which also goes over to these two caps on the front end. So at that point, if we disconnected these two red wires, we would then be testing, like this cap would be in the circuit, the top mounted choke, which we would have already determined weren't the problem, and then we would be adding this capacitor and also these two chokes into the system. And then if it passed that test, we would know that it had something to do with one of these two big caps or these other two little caps, and maybe connect one of these red wires one at a time to isolate which channel was the short. And then from there, you could, disconnect one of these two wires to take these out, and then it would identify either one of these caps or one of these caps as being the short. So, given that we had this strap crush this film cap, and that they are known for being a little bit fragile as far as being physically crushed like that, I'm 90% sure this is going to be our problem. And then the other thing I want to show you is I should have used one of these. And this is a dim bulb tester. And what this is, see, it's just an extension cord, and one leg goes through an incandescent light bulb that you screw into this hole here, obviously. And I've used, 100 watt or 60 watt bulb, something like that, and mainly use it when I'm powering up a piece of equipment that's new, that I'm not sure that everything is good to go on, and if there is a potential short, that the light bulb will just glow bright instead of being a short circuit, and it would have protected the amplifier. And I guess I just got lazy and was like, well, I didn't replace that much stuff, and I know there's not going to be a short circuit in here. And lo and behold, there was one, because of that capacitor getting crushed. And I would have never thought that would happen, but hey, live and learn. So maybe you guys can learn from my mistake and not kill a nice rectifier tube by being lazy and not using one of these dim bulb devices when you're powering up a amp the first time after you make any changes to it, not just when it's brand new. So anyway, let me get that capacitor changed. Hopefully that's going to be the problem. Obviously this time I'm going to use my dim bulb tester. And if everything's good to go, then we can go back to testing how these new ISO Tango transformers sound and perform in my 300B amp. Okay, first thing we're going to do is look at the THD versus power. And again, we're comparing this to a pair of 5K 25 watt Edcor output transformers. And I went with 5K because the 3.5Ks had too much harmonic distortion. So I had to lower the load on the output tubes to get the distortion down where I wanted it to be, running zero negative feedback. So these ISO transformers are 3.5K, and you can see they've got super low distortion, but they also make more power. And right up here at 8 watts, right when the distortion turns up, we've got a little over 2% distortion. And this is probably the range where it starts clipping this 8 to 9 watts. And we can check that by looking at the scope pattern, which we'll look at in just a second. Note on the input at 8 watts, we got 1 volt RMS, which is also a higher input sensitivity than the amp used to have with the Edcor 5K output transformers. So this was definitely a huge improvement over those Edcor output transformers. So let's go ahead and look at the scope to see where it starts clipping. Again, we got 8 watts at 1 volt RMS in. So let's go to our scope. And here's 1 volt RMS in, 1K, sine wave, no clipping. Let's go ahead and bump that up to 1.1. See what this looks like. And here's where the amp starts clipping. You can see it's clipping up here on the top. It's also starting to clip down here on the bottom. So it's symmetrically clipping within 0.1 volt of not clipping at all. And so we've got a very balanced clipping profile on this amp now. So let's go back to 1 volt. We're going to run these other tests at max power just to see what this thing can do. Again, this is going to be putting out 8 watts, putting 1 volt in. Let's take a look at the square wave. Wow, that is beautiful. It's got just a tiny bit of overshoot here, which honestly is what I like seeing in a single-ended amp. I found that when this is rounded, that it just sounds dull. And I'll get into what this thing sounds like, but the short version is it sounds unbelievable. So anyway, you see how really nice the square wave looks. Let's go ahead and go down to 100 hertz, see what that looks like. Normally that's going to be a little angled. You're not going to get a super flat square wave. This is exactly what I'm expecting to see. It's going to be angled like this. That's normal. And still got a little bit of overshoot here on the front, which is what really makes an amp sound lively. So here's the one that a lot of amps fail on, is the 10K square wave. And honestly, that looks beautiful for an amp with 0 negative feedback. Yeah, it's rolling off here on the front end, but that's going to be way beyond hearing range. And it's not spiking or oscillating or doing some kind of triangle wave weird thing like we've seen on some other amplifiers. It's just a nice, approximation of a square wave for this high frequency on a single-ended amp with no negative feedback. So here's the frequency response that I pulled off of it. And I don't think I've ever seen a frequency response curve this flat on any amp I've ever tested. And you can see down here, I mean, it's down at 10 hertz. It hasn't rolled off at all. And right here, there's a little bump up. You can see it's 0.22 dB, which is like a quarter of a dB boost down here below 20 hertz, which I don't think anybody's going to complain about. You're sure not going to hear it. And you can see, like, look at that top left number. It's just right at 0 all the way across. And then at 10K, it's down 0.12 dBs. And at 20K, it's down less than 1 dB. Again, I'm astonished. The other thing that I want to highlight is usually these big, large transformers like these, you get this down here on the low end, but you lose this. And listening to the amp, you can hear it's still got this really nice sparkle on the top end, but it's got the bass punch now like those KT120 monoblocks do out of a 300B amp. So here's our THD versus frequency. If you remember, with the Edcors, there was, I can't remember what it was, but there were several percent of distortion down here at 20 hertz, and it didn't really level off till about 100. You can see on this one, by the time you get to 40 hertz, it's hit the flat line. And it's flat all the way across. And you can see here at 30 hertz, it's only 0.1% higher than it is here. And worst case is down at 20 hertz, and it's maybe 0.75%, which is unbelievable. And in the past, I used to say that you're not going to really hear the distortion down on this part of the frequency range. What I'm learning is that while you don't hear the distortion, it makes the bass less punchy and crisp. And it just doesn't have like the drum kick punch that a transformer like this will give an amplifier. So again, let's look at the even order harmonics, and you can see the curve looks almost the same. And then when we go to the odd order, it's down here, and it actually rolls off with the odd order down on the low frequency, which is interesting. And it's probably why this amp sounds so punchy. So again, nice second order. This is just, yeah, super, super impressed. And this is pulling about the wattage that I would listen to the amp at. So you can see from that how awesome these output transformers perform. And I kind of dismissed that low frequency harmonic distortion that I'd seen in previous builds as being something that's not really audible. And I still think it's not real audible, the distortion part of it, but what you miss with that distortion is it makes the bass kind of muddy. And for certain kinds of bass, you will notice it, like a bass guitar or any other kind of string bass instrument or anything that's like a sustained kind of a bass. It really doesn't seem to change it a lot, but what it's missing is the punch that like a bass kick drum has, or anything else that's a real kind of staccato kind of bass. It's like pow. It's not there. And if you watch the video on the KT120 mono blocks, I kept saying, wow, this thing's got this bass punch that I've never heard in an amplifier before, solid state or tube. And now this amp has it too. And the other interesting thing was with the Edcors, I had to raise the impedance of the output transformer to get it to work without negative feedback. It needed the 5K primary output transformer to keep the harmonic distortion in check without using any negative feedback, which is, to me, key to the sound of a 300B amp. Is it's a zero negative feedback amplifier. And with these ISO Tangos, ran them at 3.5K because it has different output taps. So I could have changed the output tap because all you're doing is reflecting the impedance. So if I'd done that, it would have in turn raised the primary impedance. Didn't need to do it. At 3.5K, there's still super low distortion, and now this amp puts out 8 watts before it goes into clipping. And with the Skunkie tubes, it does that at 1 volt RMS in, which it's never done that before. So it just transformed this amplifier. The other really important thing is a lot of times when you go with these larger core output transformers, the 25 and 30 watt ones, it helps the bass response, but you sacrifice or you compromise the top end brightness, airiness, kind of really, nice kind of light sound on the top end to get the bass. And these got it all. They've got the bass and the top end. I just couldn't be more pleased. And again, I know $1,000 for a pair of output transformers is a lot of money, but people are spending $1,500 for a pair of tubes for their 300B amp, and even like their ELMs or EML or whatever there's other brands out there of 300B tubes, higher end ones, and they're $700, $800, $900. And so before you spend that kind of money, if your amp doesn't have these really high quality output transformers, you need to buy some. And again, I'll put the link below. Hit George up, tell him I sent you, and I think y'all are going to be amazed, especially you guys that have built this amp and used the Edcor output transformers like I did. You're going to be stunned at how much better it sounds with these ISO Tangos. And, you know, you've already kind of spent that money and stuff. You hopefully have a little money saved up. Be a good place to drop some cash into your audio system. And I'm telling you, it's going to make a very, very audible difference in your system. So, anyway, that's kind of it on this segment. I want to do another video this week comparing the Western Electric 300B tubes to the Skunkie 300B tubes with measurements and subjective listening test. And I'm not going to give you a spoiler on that. You're going to have to wait for that video. So again, if you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Please comment below about anything you'd like. I read everything, so I do read all the comments. And hopefully you guys are enjoying participating with my channel. Thanks to all you Patreon folks. Also, thanks to folks who make donations at my website or use my Amazon affiliate links or any of the other things that help sponsor the channel. Merch store has some cool merch. Get coffee cups and all kinds of stuff. And I think my logo is really cool. It's a fun shirt to have. So go visit my merch store. And until the next video, have a nice day.